You inherit more than money. That is the beginning of everything. In the most material sense, yes. Some people receive actual currency or property or accounts passed down from the generation before. But nearly everyone receives something far more powerful and far less discussed. You inherit the story about money. You inherit the tone of voice your parent used when talking about whether there would be enough. You inherit the year your ancestor hit a crisis so profound it reshaped how they thought about scarcity forever after. You inherit the patterns of holding and releasing, of trusting and protecting, of believing and doubting. These are the inheritances that run deeper than bank accounts. These are the stories that write themselves into your bones before you have the words to question them. The Kabbalists understood this with precision. They held that the family tree is not primarily a genealogy of bloodlines, it is a genealogy of verdicts. Each generation makes sense of their suffering by telling a story about why the suffering happened. That story becomes law in the next generation. The grandfather who lost everything in the Depression becomes the father who cannot spend freely. The grandmother who bore too many children becomes the mother who fears abundance. The parent who was shamed for asking becomes the child who learned to hide their needs. These stories are not malice. They are inheritance. They are what ancestors left behind, believing it would protect the generations that followed. And you have been living inside these stories your entire life, probably without ever naming them as stories at all. Every financial story you carry arrived in a specific year, in specific circumstance. Not because it is true universally, because it was true that year. Your ancestor made sense of a specific crisis using the only tool available to them at the time: narrative. They told themselves a story about what the crisis meant. And because they told that story repeatedly, to stay sane, the story eventually became the template through which all future experience was filtered. The Zohar calls this the verdict, a sentence passed under duress in an emergency by someone who was not in their best mind. And yet that verdict travels down the family tree like DNA, written into the reactions, the decisions, the instincts of everyone who came after. The Kabbalistic teaching at this point is both compassionate and exact. The ancestor who passed the verdict to your parent was not trying to harm you. They were trying to protect you. They believed that if your parent lived in fear, your parent would be safer. They believed that if your parent never hoped for abundance, your parent would never be devastated by scarcity. They believed the narrative was armor, and in that moment, in that crisis, in that year, it probably was. But armor that becomes skin eventually becomes a prison, and the person wearing it forgets that the person who gave it to them was trying to save them, not trap them. That is the first part of the inheritance work, recognizing that the verdict was written in love, even if it was written in fear. So how do you actually work with an inherited verdict? Not with anger, not with blame, not with gratitude either, which can sometimes be a way of staying stuck. The Zohar offers 3 specific questions to ask about what you inherited. The first is, what was my ancestor afraid of? Not what did they teach me, but what terror was underneath the teaching. The parent who could not spend freely was terrified of poverty. The grandmother who controlled everything was terrified of powerlessness. The great-grandfather who never risked anything was terrified of the humiliation of failure. Naming the fear does not excuse it, but it contextualizes it. It puts the verdict back into the moment it was written, instead of letting it live as eternal law. The second question is, what did they protect against? What specific harm were they trying to prevent by teaching this story? Because every verdict is a form of protection. The story, "Money Runs Out," is a protective story, If you believe it, you will be careful, and careful people are supposedly safer. The story, "People like us don't succeed," is protective. If you don't try, you can't fail publicly. The story, "Abundance is dangerous," is protective. If you stay small, you stay safe. These protections made sense. They were real protections in the moment they were devised. But protection that was necessary at one point in time can become imprisonment at another. And you are allowed to ask, does this protection still serve me? Does this protection keep me safe, or does it keep me small? The third and final question is, what would I protect against instead? This is where the healing becomes practical. Because you do not work with inherited verdicts by pretending they do not exist, you work with them by consciously choosing a different one. The ancestor who feared poverty might have taught you scarcity. What do you want to teach? The grandmother who feared powerlessness might have passed you rigidity. What do you want to pass instead? The great-grandfather who feared failure might have bequeathed you paralysis. What do you want to bequeath instead? This is not positive thinking. This is not denying the danger that your ancestors faced. This is simply saying, that was their verdict. Mine is different. That was their protection. Mine takes a different form. That was the story they needed to tell to survive. I am telling a different story to live. Here is the Kabbalistic teaching that ties all of this together. You are not required to carry what your ancestors carried, but you will carry it until the moment you make a conscious choice to set it down and pick up something different. That choice is not a betrayal of your ancestors. It is actually the deepest form of honoring them. Because what they wanted, underneath the fear and the verdict and the protection, was for you to be safe. And you have discovered that safety does not look like the safety they imagined. Your safety looks like abundance. Your safety looks like risk. Your safety looks like hope. Your ancestors would recognize themselves in your choices because you carry their strength, the same strength that survived the crisis they survived. You are just pointing it in a different direction. Share this with one person who has felt the weight of a family financial pattern and thought it was their personal failure. It is not a personal failure. It is an inheritance. And inheritances can be rewritten. You are not the first in your family to face money, but you may be the first to face it with full sight of the story you are carrying. That sight is where freedom begins. Follow this channel so the next teaching finds you when you need to claim what was really yours all along. And leave one word. What is the verdict you are finally ready to set down? We lift the next spark together. Your ancestors survived so you could become free from what freed them.